Hello, and welcome to Workplace Stories, the podcast where human capital experts share their real-world experiences and insights. Hosted by Red Thread Research, Workplace Stories surfaces the latest industry trends, innovative talent strategies, and best practices for success. Tune in for practical advice on how to best transform your workplace.
Welcome to Workplace Stories. This week we talked to Josh Novelle, who's the Global Head of People Solutions Experience. We talked quite a bit about tech, what's going on with tech and the future of tech and how to think about tech. Stacia, what stood out to you?
Josh is a tech guy, but when we asked him about employee experience, he began with a very non-tech guy answer, which was that employee experience is so much bigger than the HR system. We've written about that. I had a framework that we published a few years ago about that, but it was really refreshing to hear that come from him. And the other thing he said right at the beginning is that most HR tech isn't actually solving employees' problems from employees' point of view. And so that was, I think, a really interesting perspective for him to be bringing in as an HR tech leader. We also talked quite a bit about the future of technology, and he gave a real call out for middleware and background systems being underrated, and how we're really probably on this path to headless technology, or at least more headless technology than we've had before. So where there isn't a UX or a UI on the front end of it, but instead it's really playing in the tech ecosystem for that data and capabilities to be delivered in some other place, whether that be a co-pilot or within an HRIS or somewhere else. But his thinking about that I thought was really powerful. What about for you, Danny?
I did too. I kind of want to grab onto that little piece because more and more we're seeing the employee experience play out behind the scenes instead of in front. So for years and years, vendors have raved about their employee experience or their user experience. And a lot of that is now going behind, and that came through in that discussion about headless. I think the other things that really stood out for me is he mentioned that your HR tech vendors' incentives might be working against you. We see this a lot in the learning space, particularly. The vendors clearly want people to be inside the platform because that's what they're measured on and that's how they sell it. But is that really what an organization needs? Or should they be thinking of meeting the needs exactly where they are? Not necessarily spending time in a platform, but getting them what they want and aligning to maybe different KPIs that the organization actually cares about. And then the other point he made was if you've got the smartest people in your organization filling out HR forms, it's not a very good use of resources. And so how do we make it as streamlined and as simple as possible so that we're not wasting those resources where they don't need to be wasted in the name of bad technology integrations? We think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. You should definitely listen. And if you love it, please like it and send it to all your best friends. And if you really like it, we've got quite a bit of research on HR and HR technologies at redthreadresearch.com. Give us a listen. Welcome to Workplace Stories, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat today.
Yeah, we are too. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently the Senior Director of what we call People Experience here at Convatec, which is essentially every single piece of what exists under the surface from a technology perspective, how it works, and the stuff that most employees prod and poke on a day-to-day basis from a HR experience perspective.
All right. And can you tell us a little bit about Convatec for those that aren't familiar with the company?
Yeah, sure. So Convatec is a medical devices organization. It's one of those things where we're involved with things like infusion devices. We're involved in advanced wound care, bandages and things like that. So people with long-term wounds and things like that. And also things like ostomy bags and stuff. So a lot of just general great quality background medical technology and life-changing devices that people utilize. And they might not even ever look at the label to realize it's one of us, but we're one of those companies that sits in the background doing great things.
Awesome. Thanks.
That's awesome. Today, we're going to talk about people, tech, and employee experience, which is two of our favorite topics, actually. Can you tell our listeners why they should listen to you?
Great question. For me, it comes down to I've worked in many different organizations, many different industries, and generally it's this is a synthetic pull together of everything that I've seen and heard and learned and experimented with and pitfalls that I've made mistakes with in the past and things like that. But generally, hopefully, it's just a voice that you can hear things and go, yep, that is the sort of stuff that we're looking at. And we want to try and avoid these things. We want to try and move ahead in terms of how we're perceived by our own businesses as well.
So I actually want to come clean at this point. During my keynote at Learning Technologies Conference last week, I used an example from you that you gave me in our prep call that I didn't have permission to use. So I did not attribute it. And somebody in that audience heard that and then called you and said, hey, I heard this. I think it's probably you. And then you came back to me and said, hey, did you? And I said, yes. So first of all, apologies. It was in the spur of the moment. And I thought it was such a great example of how to use technology to solve problems that the organization had. And we can share that with you, Stacia, because you're looking at me like, what is this? It was such a great example. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on this podcast, because you're thinking about technology and how it actually solves problems and how they all connect together to create that experience rather than thinking about them individually and how they solve one problem at a time. I want to know how you got there. What is your philosophy when it comes to people tech? And how are you thinking about how the machines interact with the humans?
Yeah, sure. So it's a really simple philosophy at the end of the day. We pay people to do fantastic things. Like I genuinely believe that everyone comes to their work to try and do the best they can. There might be a few slither of people that are they're like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to sit in the break room as long as I can and eat pizza until the end of the day. But generally, I believe that people at their core are trying to do the best work they can that energizes them, inspires them, or gives them a paycheck so they can go and buy jet ski and do the things that really matter for them in life. But still, it all loops and interconnects back together. For me, we really don't really look at it in that mindset. So we have people that are highly skilled in the latest and greatest medical innovation in the world. And then we might say, hey, you didn't fill in a PO correctly, or you submitted a timesheet wrong, or something like that. And we generally just forget that actually that's not their purpose. That's our purpose as HR to tell great stories off of the back of that sort of data. But actually, the inputting it in is sometimes conflated and confused. We really care about telling the best stories and improving things in the background. Yet then we conflate that to, well, that's got to be a user experience there. And that's why it's people experience. It's not user experience. It's not HRIS. It's not technology management or anything like that. It's a really different kind of approach to it that, yes, it starts within our core HR pieces, but also it's a far more collaborative function that loops across an entire organization to just say, should that really work that way? And think about it, if you were someone that didn't know the lingo of corporate, how would you react to that? And they go, oh yeah, I probably wouldn't understand it. It's like, great, well, change it.
Like that. I was reading a book recently and it was talking about this woman who wanted some time off. So she physically filled out a form and handed it to her assistant to walk over to HR. That was the process. And I'm like, things don't happen that way anymore. But then I started thinking about the technology that we have and we do it that way. We just do it without physically walking it over to HR. We still have brilliant people like you discussed filling out HR forms. Is that the best use of their time? Is that what we're paying them for? No, it is not, but we're still doing that way.
It's crazy when we think about I'm not going to name names, but think about the kind of massive HR technology stacks that you've got available to us. A good chunk of them have things like Outlook and Google Calendar integration and things like that. But it's normally, oh yeah, once that request is fully approved, it will dump back an ICS file so it books out that day for you. Absolutely none of them have a book annual leave. So like while you're looking at Outlook, it's like new meeting, new Teams meeting. Like why is there not a drop down to be like new annual leave request? Because that's where that person manages their time. So why are we looking at absence and time differently in that regards?
That's a good point.
It's a really good point.
And if you're one of the vendors, I really want royalties on that when you eventually develop it.
Yes. Hey, good luck with that. Danny and I have been in that game for a while. I think that leads into a good question, though, which is how do you determine, from your perspective, which tech is going to be useful for the organization? So how do you go about choosing tech? How do you think about integrating it and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so there's a few pieces at the end of the day, and a lot of it comes down to a very untechnology approach to it. Of, do you generally enjoy working with those people? Are you on the same mental wavelength? Because if you're not, spoiler alert, you're not going to have a fun time in partnership with those people whatsoever. For me, I like working with product teams where I can actually talk to them and say, hey, how about we solve this problem? Because yes, this might be a pain point for my business, but actually there's going to be pain points all over the shop that can be applied and really Frankenstein that you could do the same thing, but just in different ways and have it do something for the people. For me as well, actual technology providers, so the actual kind of account managers or sales team or whatever they want to call themselves nowadays to try and disguise that they're getting commission checks in the background, and ask them what their motivations are, because it's a really simple thing. Some of those motivations won't align with what you're trying to do. So certain tech stacks, spoiler alert, their commission for their account managers is based on your users' time spent in that platform, which you can probably tell from the sort of preamble we've already gone through, that's not a good thing in most cases, because we're not paying them the primary purpose of their role to input this sort of stuff in a HR technology stack or a finance technology stack or whatever it happens to be. So for me, it comes down to that. There's also a concept around specialist players for specialist purposes. I'm a big believer in that. We have a number of technology providers that are growing across all pieces, and it becomes a jack of trades piece where they're not really doing a great job across most things, but they're doing an all right job enough to really make it so it's not contestable enough to warrant the effort to kick it out of bed. But it's still there where everyone's there quite grudgingly. And then you've got the one guy wearing the hoodie that's branded with that particular piece there that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We can talk about that piece a little bit later on. But for me, it really comes down to like, do you think the same way? Do you want it to work? Obviously, great if it's philosophically you align. For me, all these technology stacks do really cool things, but are they actually thinking about, we want to just expand out, or are they trying to enhance their specialism? Because that's it for me. And if they're willing to be part of like a headless people experience ecosystem, that's really cool there.
So I think that's really interesting. You're absolutely right about the incentives, and that's an important thing to consider. But when you were thinking yourself about the employee experience, like what they're doing, there's so much that goes into it. How do you decide what should be in there, or what's the level of complexity too far, or what needs to go, what needs to stay? Is there a process for getting to that? And then obviously making sure that the vendors do the things you want them to do.
It's a really delicate balancing piece. So for me, it will be what's happening today, what's wrong with that? Because a number of times I'm convinced that people don't realize they've got a problem until they come home from a trade fair and then they go, oh yeah, I saw this on a banner 57 times. So we must pursue that because that's what everyone else is doing. It's like, well, actually, no, like have a chat with your services team. Your services team are like your user feedback team, essentially. You should treat them almost like a kind of panel interview, because they're hearing and feeling the pain points of your users every single day, because they see the repetitive cases coming in. They see all the bugbears. They see all of that sort of stuff. So have a chat with them, form a really good relationship with them, because they're going to be your eyes and ears. And too often those things are completely separated out. But then also that's one big pot for where your opportunities could be for simplification. But also, what are you trying to do as a business? Like when you look at all these kind of, I don't know, recruitment systems as an example, like the real purpose is to find great talent that could fit the motivations of your business that you want to hopefully come in and do a good job. It's that simple. Yeah, there's so much kind of fluff around it that you just need to really say, look, cut to the core. We're trying to find the right people. So it's a headhunting game. Great. What are your connections to your data sources? What your partnerships look like there? And really weigh it out, because if you're not clear about what the real purpose is, it's so easy to get lost in the marketing spin of buzzwords and, oh, everything's AI nowadays. Is it, or is it just metadata matching at the end of the day? Like really dig underneath it and just go in and have a clear brief of what's our problem statement, how are we trying to solve it, and share that with vendors, but not necessarily vendors just from that particular work stream. Pitch it to a whole other number of vendors. Talk to your peers about it as well. And they'll generally go, we know good people that talk and that can help you fix that exact thing.
And I think the thing that's interesting about that is talking about the problem or the challenge that you have across all the different vendors, right? Like the challenge that exists does not change because of who you're talking to. The challenge exists because it's something that's important to the business. And it's going to take multiple of them to solve it, almost certainly. And so making sure that kind of everyone is clear on the North Star of what you're trying to do, and then figuring out their pieces, because they know their technology better than you do, at least particularly before implementation, but giving them the opportunity to take the piece that makes sense for them. I think that's a meaningful way to think about it.
Yeah, I've not seen enough technology joined proposals. That's one thing that I would love to see a massive grow in the industry, to say, look, actually, we feel we can take this bit of your pain point. We feel it can take this point, and this is how we come together to do it. If not, you normally get one person that goes, yeah, we can do all of this sort of stuff. And, oh, you want the analytics out the back? Yeah, we've got some of that. And it's on the roadmap and it's going to be better. And like, no, just say this is where we're really strong. This is where we're weak. And this is where we rely on our partners. Be complimentary about your own network as well, because that's going to like pay dividends in the long term. I'm going to trust your opinion as a partner there.
Josh, when we were having a conversation, and because of some recent research that I've been doing, I've been looking at how platforms play together and how that might not be necessary in the future. In what you just said, you were talking a lot about this vendor does this thing well, and this vendor does this thing, and we need to play together well so that blah, blah, blah. And I agree with that. The way that we've been doing it for a really long time is vendors together, they have people on the back end sort of making decisions about if they go to market together, but also how they exchange information and how they connect and whose face gets shown to the person and all of that kind of stuff. I feel like I'm leading the witness here. But it feels like we're ripe for change. Like maybe the idea of buying in platform form may not be a thing forever. And I was just wondering your take on that.
It's a really interesting one. We're starting to see the longer term implications of so many vendors rushing in to be like, hey, we've got an open API standard, or we've figured out a way that you can do bulk imports and stuff like that. All of that, and not many vendors will like hearing it, but it's like, that's left them open to be, hey, you might not have an integration, but I can slap an RVA bot on the back end that's just going to force imports in every minute. So you kind of are integrated whether you like it or not. Or I can put a digital adoption platform in the front end so that when someone inputs a certain bit of information over here, it can automatically go and put it over there as well. So actually, we can force those interlinked experiences, whether the vendors like it or not now, because they've opened themselves up to it and they can't ever shut themselves down to it. So we're at a space now where if you start thinking more holistically than your individual tech stack, you can start to enable these sort of pieces there.
So do you think that's going to change how we buy? Because right now, like the value proposition for buying a platform is like all of this functionality, which you may use like 10 or 15% of that functionality. And the data all speaks to each other, right? And Stacey's our resident data geek. But that seems to be becoming more important because of skills discussions and AI discussions within the organization. We need to understand the data a little bit better. And so that has been the sort of value proposition of platform to this point. Talk to me about that. Like, where do you think that's going?
I hope it changes, quite frankly, because it's one of those ones where we've seen the same story repeat over and over again. We've seen vendors become successful in one particular industry. They've expanded into multiple others. Like, hey, they're a really great finance tool. And then they've started going, hey, we got some HR stuff. And oh, look, we've kind of bolted on some talent stuff and it's naff, but your finance team are going to be happy because it's all on the same PO. So it's easier to manage from that perspective. Or we've seen the growth the other way, or out of any direction to any different way. It's really a piece for me where it's just coming down to like, what is it trying to do? Like, let's go back to the like leave management and stuff like that. Like, we are trying to make sure that firstly, we're from a HR perspective, we're seeing, are people utilizing their leave? Are there signs of burnout? Are there things like that? But from an employee's perspective, they want to clock out and not be bothered by work. Like, it's as simple as that at the end of the day. So why are we putting all these barriers in the way of, oh yeah, you got to do it over here and over here and over here, and you forgot to cancel your one-on-one with your boss, so you're getting text messages now saying, where are you? We've got a client presentation that I wanted to go through with you. No, just keep it really simple. But when it comes to like the buying approach to it, I really think that it does need to be just massively overhauled. We've already talked about collaborative pitches. I've seen a handful in my career. Spoiler alert, every single time I saw one, they won because it was hand over fist, far better than the individual components coming separately. One of them was a technology provider that was trying to provide a bit of our HR suite essentially, and the other one was an analytics tool. And they said, look, we're just going to smush these things together and we're going to make it work there. And that for me is where the technology labeling is getting far less to that exact swim lane. Like, you talk about, oh yeah, there's HR analytic tools. Great, but also there's off-the-shelf analytic tools that are really, really great. And all they are missing is that big data piece that comes in the background, or can pull that big data piece in the background. Most generative AI bots that exist because the data exists on the web somewhere. So it's scraping it and it's going to be able to pull it in the long term. So you can probably say, hey, tell me how this compares to the medical industry average churn rate. And it will be able to go, oh, look, we've looked at 15 different annual reports where they have to report their churn rate, or we can figure it out in a very simple calculation. So here's how you look at it. You don't need a HR specific analytics tool to tell you that.
Interesting. My mind has been really expansive the last 2 weeks because some of the research that I'm doing right now. But do you think it's going to lead to a massive change in HR tech? Because to this point, HR tech has been a thing. Like, you have HR tech. And Stacey and I have had an ongoing discussion about where people data lives for, I don't know, how long? 5 years, 6 years? It's a while. Yeah. We've been arguing like, where does it live? Does it live in an analytics tool? Does it actually live in the HRIS? Where does it live? But if we're starting to talk about like the HRIS value only being the holding of that data because we can do the other functionality in different ways, what does that mean for continuing the sort of the industry of HR technology?
I think it starts to erode, but I think it starts to erode because people are fragmenting it to be, how do we configure this puzzle piece for our exact industry and our exact needs? Oh, well, that vendor works well here, that vendor works well here. And forcing them to interconnect and interlink, because going back to like the headless approach, the end user doesn't know what systems are processing these things in the background. They just know like, oh, if I do this, it pings through over there and it all works quite nicely. They want it to be a commercial level seamless experience. I say commercial level because sometimes commercial level isn't that seamless as well, but no one out there is ever saying, oh, I'm a really big fan of Costco's self-checkout. Like, yeah, they're a big fan of Costco, and maybe like the particular brand of chili bite for me that exists in Costco. But we pretend that like, oh no, it's all about the till system because I'm wearing the hoodie that's based on the till system. So that's my ethos, that's that sort of stuff. But that's a change, I think, to the talent marketplace that is coming as well, where it used to be really strict, where you almost had internal spokespeople for these technology stacks. And you still do have it a lot of the time, that you'll speak to people and you'll say, are you a Convatec professional? And they'll go, no, I'm a Tech Stack 1 professional. And you'll see it in their email signatures and you'll see it on their LinkedIn. And that's the motivator for them. So I'm like, hey, when I give you a problem, are you thinking about how we solve it as a business? Or are you thinking about how your particular tool set solves it? It goes back to the old analogy of like, if you've only got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's that whole philosophy piece that their value isn't the tech stack. Their value is they're thinking about how to apply the tech stack. And they haven't quite, I say they, but it's like a good chunk of professionals still intertwine their own value with a specific vendor.
So I want to push back a little bit on this. I've been with our vendor friends for the last 3 weeks, and I can hear them, like in my ear, I can hear them. And I think one of the things they would say is, okay, Josh, that's fine on the UX, right? If we're talking about headless, like we may have a UX, or we may not have the same level of sophistication of UX. It may feed into some sort of single pane of glass, Copilot, whatever it is that you have developed internally. But the things that we do in terms of combining data, or in terms of storing data, or in terms of data engineering, those are still unique, or we do them better than others. And so as we talk about the HR tech industry, what it makes me wonder is, are we just going to see a removal of the head, if you will, but still see, like, there's a place for middleware software. Middleware is an incredibly important part of the skills conversation and a lot of the people analytics conversation. So maybe it's just a change in how the technology operates, or what we expect of it, because we've been expecting that enterprise, seamless, consumer grade technology. And maybe that's just not what we should be expecting moving forward. So I guess just saying that it's all like basically a database feels to me a little overly simplistic. And I'm sure our vendor friends who are going to listen to this will certainly think so. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. It comes down to what is that vendor's particular space in the journeys that you're trying to do. You mentioned middleware. Middleware is an absolutely crucial piece, and I'm a huge fan of it. Why? Because it doesn't try and put itself in front of the user. And that's because it simply knows, hey, we're trying to put one thing from this space to this space and transform the data maybe in the middle, or sometimes it's acting as a privacy layer or a governance layer or something like that. It's hugely important, but it doesn't try and be like, hey, let's put ourselves in front of the user and let's take time out of the diary. It's very much understanding its clear purpose as a background space. I think a lot of organizations where I speak to, they genuinely forget that the platform isn't everything. Like sometimes what you're doing in the background, your IP is the most important thing you've got. Great, then leverage that. If you're a great skills-based organization, try and make yourself a partner to other skills-based organization to use the same taxonomy, or better yet, open yourself up to any taxonomy will do. And by the way, we happen to have one if you want to use it, and you're starting with us, but if not, we'll ingest someone else that's really friendly.
Okay. I think that's a reasonable point. One of the things we have talked about is, I think, Danny, what you found, there's 11 different learning technology.
There's an average of 11.
Average of 11. And then we've got all the rest of it. So the idea that we were going to put each of those in front of people anyway is crazy. And it feels like, to some extent, as we've moved into this Copilot agentic world, people have been continuing that logic. And I don't think that holds up. But I do think you made the comment earlier about the Costco tills. For my American compatriots, that's the registers. Tills or registers. There's still some technology where people do know the vendor. Even, I'll just take my husband. He works in a big tech company and he actually knows who their HRIS is. He's like, oh, I had to go put that into blah. And maybe there is for some of these, like maybe instead of it just being some sort of generic headless corporate whatever, everything feeds into something. Because that's a lot of what we're seeing, particularly with the HRIS tech stack compression. So everything is now getting plugged into a Workday or an SAP or an Oracle or a UKG or whomever. I hope I mentioned enough of you that you don't think I'm biased.
Insert another vendor name here if we need to later on.
Right. So maybe it's just compression, but not a elimination, I guess is maybe.
Completely, yeah. It's about like where there's a really clear purpose. One of the most interesting campaigns I ever did in my career was around dependence and if something happens to you, who gets your benefits and things like that. And I won't name names.
This isn't one of the most interesting ones?
I'll get to it. Trust me. This was in an industry where, let's just say, a certain level of our exec happened to keep doing silly things that meant that policy had to be executed. We had to, on a regular basis, kind of report something happened to Tim, and therefore, according to our database, everything has to go to Sally type thing, like really simplistic. And it was very much kind of computer says this. And they were like, oh no, but like the family's pushing back against that because they divorced really messily 5 years ago and things like that. And you're like, oh God, and it comes back to the dirty data existing in the system type thing. We just extracted all of that data, did a giant mail merge to everyone saying, hey, do you want your ex to have this? If this is the person that you're recently separated from, maybe go and change it. And it was a moment of, if we really look at all these journeys that we go through, a lot of them can be invisibly done, but that only heightens the ones so that when you need to interrupt the day-to-day journey, it receives so much more attention, it receives so much more respect because they're like, oh, hey, I haven't heard from the HR system of record for 6 months and suddenly it's pinging me to do something. Maybe it's actually an important thing to do. Or maybe we've just exported from it, hey, here's all your details in the email. If this is correct, delete it and never do anything again. And we assume a data freshness score off of it. Whereas if it's not, go and change it now because it's only going to hurt you in the long term.
I actually want you to take a second, Josh, and let's get back to experience for just a second. I want you to tell the story that I told very poorly in the keynote. It was a perfect example of how we rely on people to step out of their work so much to take care of things that we care about. Can you just tell that story?
Sure. So this was a really simple piece that we were like, let's build this and see what happens with it. But essentially, during the like booking annual leave process and things like that, most people know it's a generic experience. You look at a calendar, it has how many days you got left down the side, all that sort of stuff there. And we generally just built a little overlay bot to look at it and say, if this number is over a certain amount, depending on a certain point of the year. So a pure guesstimate burn rate, like you've got 20 days a year, so minus 2 days every single month. This is what a healthy-ish one should look like. If you're over that, maybe just go, hey, Danny, this number's a bit high. Like, do you want to consider like taking some annual leave? Or if not, here's a little PDF that's hosted on our learning system around recognizing the signs of burnout in yourself. What we then did is some good old-fashioned learning technology analytics of the average people that engaged with that resource. What was their long-term sick rate in the organization? And we found it was significantly less than those that didn't engage with that rate. So the business case back to the business is essentially by us prompting people at the right time at the right place, they reflected on, hey, are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having the migraines? Like, you've got an abundance of this stuff. So unless you have a plan to like road trip around Australia later on this year, maybe use some for your own well-being here. But just seeing that, for me, it's one of those, it's a good thing to do. It's a really heartwarming one where you're like, yeah, now it might mean nothing, but the business case makes sense there. And that's what we need to get better at, is talking about actually what's this thing doing for us as an organization so that we can actually say, what's that worth to us as an organization?
Yeah, I think I like that example for a couple of reasons. First of all, it involves data that's readily available. Like, we have so much data in the organization that we don't use to solve fairly simple problems. And the other thing was the sort of passive nature of the development. Like, hey, just so you know, here's the thing. Take a look at it and take care of this. Take care of yourself.
All it needs is 2 seconds to be like, am I okay?
All right, we're going to take a break right now in the middle, and we're going to get to know a little bit about you, Josh. We call this our lightning round. 3 questions that have been pre-approved by you so that we don't put you on the spot. We used to ask if you like pineapple on your pizza. That has caused a pretty big fight between Station and I, so we don't ask that one anymore.
Very divisive.
Yeah.
Very divisive, and there's only one right answer.
And it's not Station's. I'll tell you that right now. So first question, Where do you find inspiration?
So for me, inspiration comes from just a number of places. Like it's my team itself. So I've got a fantastic team and I've got a great privilege to lead a really great team here. It could be from my peers. So like you mentioned earlier on, like we happen to bump into each other at a trade show and like just talk stuff. And like this can sometimes be a great way of, there's many people in the industry that I text and just go, this is a curveball idea. And like, is it stupid? Is it worth me investing any significant time or effort in this piece? It's also looking at other industry. Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? And think, what could the motivation be behind that? Because even as much as I'd like it to be, not many large corporations do stuff just to be nice. Like a lot of them do it because there's some sort of factor and some sort of motivator. So I do overanalyze things an awful lot. And if you ask my wife, she'll see me sitting at like a cafe somewhere. It's like you're looking at something, you're trying to backwork it to try and figure out what's the business case behind that. And I'm like, yeah, because they can't be that friendly. Like I don't trust them enough. That for me is like the biggest points of inspiration there. Just looking around like your own team, your own network, and just other strands of life. Like don't get caught in your own bubble.
I like it.
Me too. What are the top 3 items on your bucket list?
Oh, okay. So there's a handful. So for those that know me and for those that don't know me, you're about to find out. Travel is a huge motivator for me. And over the last couple of years, my wife and I have really sat down and gone, what are if we were told tomorrow you could never travel again? And you can probably tell this came out of like 2020 kind of thinking that we were like, oh, there's still a load of stuff we'd quite like to do. One of those things is a big trip out to Japan. Spoiler alert, next Friday, I'm going on annual leave. And I'm going to be running up and down Southwest Japan. And hopefully none of your listeners are creepy stalkers to come and find me. But no, I'll be running around Southwest Japan for the next couple of weeks in a couple of weeks' time. So if you do want to reach out to me after this, expect a little out of office for a little bit of time. But that's one of my big kind of bucket list items there. For me as well, you can probably tell I'm quite a geeky guy with the background. I'm a big fan of like my Lego sets and all that sort of stuff. So like for me, being involved in a design process of something of that nature would just be simply amazing and simply just really cool, quite frankly. Like to be able to say like I had a bit of input into that. And this is back to some of my philosophies of I want people to have stuff that I want to buy in all frames of life, whether that's the Lego group, PS I'm available to be sponsored by them if anyone there happens to be reaching out, or whether it's HR technology vendors. At the end of the day, like a good chunk of my kind of that peer group that I was talking to earlier in terms of inspirations, some of them are my old account managers and things like that, because we've generally talked and it's not like vendors are friend or food. Like, no, you can really actually make great friendships there to say, how do we make this thing a bit better ourselves? And then for me, the last piece, the kind of bucket list piece, this is a really kind of odd concept, but it's called luxury off-grid. I've termed it as that, where I love the concept of off-grid living, where like you've got like soil in your toes and things like that, where you're growing your own food and plowing your own water up in the soil and stuff like that. But also I'm a geeky guy. Like you don't get a PS5 to run off grid that well. But like there's a little bit for me where I'm like, I want that luxury. So like we've got a house where we put the solar in, we put the batteries in. I keep showing my wife like what the groundwater levels are because we live on an old brewery site. There is fresh water 5 meters below our soil. So the amount of begging I'm doing to try and just shove a pipe down there to be like, hey, if everything all went to hell, we'd be okay.
That's awesome. I have a brother with a farm. He's a gentleman farmer, if you will. He's doing the same thing. He's got a master's degree in engineering. He's got like in case the world goes to hell, here's like my hobby right this second.
It's soft prepping. No one's going to make a YouTube documentary out of me, but I'm not a million miles off.
Yeah, and it's not like the prepping mindset. It's just, I wonder if, blah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There may be a few more cans of beans than there should be in the cupboard, but it's not like a whole cupboard of beans.
One more question for you. What's the most impressive thing you know how to do?
Oh, that probably goes back to where I started my career, which is one of those kind of really squiggly careers there. But I actually started off being a welder. And so that was my dream I was a big fan of scuba diving and doing welding. So my plan was like, hey, maybe I should just be one of those people that works 4 days a year and welds up some pipes underwater and like sits on the beach somewhere. That was the plan initially. And then realized I can do it, but I'm not that great at it. So I kept getting burned, kept getting cut. So I was like, hey, I need to probably find another career before I lose a finger here.
Good grief. It's like a 180 though, like from what you were planning on doing and what you ended up doing. That's pretty dramatic.
I feel like we need more questions to hear about that journey.
I know.
Let's go back to AI.
AI, okay.
In lieu of that, let's go back.
In lieu of not welding under the water, like let's go to talk about AI.
Yeah, my brother's an underwater photographer, so I usually can win on the underwater thing, but underwater welding, that is next level.
And ending up where you are from underwater welding is, wow. Okay.
A very squiggly career path. Like, have a scroll through my LinkedIn if you want to have a look and just,
I'm gonna
just ask how the hell did that happen questions.
I love it. All right, let's talk about AI. In a previous conversation, you mentioned using AI inside platforms like Teams to pick up on sentiment or patterns. And would not understand, where do you see AI really helping employees today versus just adding some noise or unnecessary complexity?
Now, I think this is a really, really important one, because there's a number of vendors that I've spoken to where I generally say, oh, great that you've got an AI thing, because let's face it, everyone does nowadays. But it's, what is this really doing for us as an organization? And for me, there's a few really critical points where AI can make the difference. Okay. And some really cool examples that I've seen some of my peers start to experiment with is like an AI support bot that happens to scrape all the policy documentations and things like that. Okay. So people can say, hey, what's our parental leave policy? Great. And it gives you that. What I've not seen yet is someone sprinkling in some of the HR data magic there, where you go, hey, what's the parental leave policy? And it goes, oh, well, Stacey, for you, based on like where you are in your career and how long you've been with us, you're actually entitled to this and this if you were to take your like maternity leave as of this date. But is that the date you're thinking of? Because it's next week, that's quite soon. Or do you want to adjust that date? Oh yeah, well, I'm thinking about 4 years' time. Great, well, here's what that could look like in 4 years' time. Start to sprinkle in some of that magic. That's a really cool opportunity there, where it's like all these things in the background coming together to say like, look, the policy is this, the calculations are that, but here's their actual time spent and what benefit plans they sign up for. So actually, here's what it looks like for them. Because you know that as soon as someone's asked, well, what's the policy? They're going to go, that's cool. I'm not going to do those sums. So what's in it for me? And they're going to raise case for our tier 1 service desk. So going back earlier to our be friendly to your service desk there, ask them and they go, hey, yeah, 90% of our tickets are just doing this Excel calculation. Oh, can you show me how to do it? Oh yeah, well, we've got an Excel sheet that does it here. Why don't we just put that in the bot or in the article so that it can actually do the actual kind of pieces right there and then live for that person? So for me, it comes down to that sort of stuff. It's fantastic at, and this is the whole kind of open data lake versus closed data lake kind of conversation. There's certain points and certain bots that will be able to ask certain things in certain ways. But being able to really target that, like if you're saying, going back to the policy conversation, hey, what's the parental leave policy? I don't want it to scrape off the internet and say, hey, well, according to .gov, it's this, this, and this. I'll go, no. Yeah, what's R1? Like, what's one actually applicable to me, not the legal minimums, unless you're telling me that R1 is below the legal minimums, and in which case, maybe repeatedly tell our HR coordinators about that so they can change it. But it's really like that delicate balance of what should be an internal question, what should be an external question, because really that is a really hard, indistinguishable thing. Because someone could be saying, what is the font? Okay, great. That's probably something that a generative AI today would go, I'm going to chuck that to a generic search engine, whether that's Bing or whether that's Google or whatever. And it's just going to go, here's what a font is. And it's going to give you the definition. Whereas if it's being asked in Copilot in PowerPoint, you know, it's probably asking about that specific font right there. And it's looking at, is this a off the shelf one or is this a corporate one? Because what if it said, hey, this is actually your own custom in-house one. So if you're looking for it on your Google Sheets or maybe you're updating your CV sneakily in the background, you can't use it for that.
Yeah. So talk to me about this. Stacia mentioned the idea of single pane of glass earlier, which for those of you who aren't as big of geeks as we are, it's basically one bot that rules them all. Basically, you can ask a single pane of glass a question and it will respond to you. You mentioned something really important to that, which is context, like what context you're in order to get that to work. Do you see a day when we do have a single pane of glass? And if not, how do you manage all the bots that you're talking about then? Because that's what we're seeing is like all of these technologies are coming out with these bots. Many of them are invisible to the human, but many of them are not. Like, how do you manage them all and make sure you're asking the right bot the right questions?
I think two pieces for me. One is placement. So where is that bot available? Like, very simply, if there's a bot that can help you on Excel, spoiler alert, put it in Excel. Only make it available in Excel. Like, really, really simple stuff. The next point is integrations. And this is a piece of the market that there's only a handful of people really starting to get behind, which is why can't it be multiple bots that someone's speaking to at the same time and let it decide which bot answers it? Now, there's a whole things in the background around tone of voice and how to respond to people and things like that, because if you suddenly fall into the finance bot and it starts, here's the PO numbers, here's the reference code, here's the tax calculations. You might be like, no, I just wanted to know something generic here. Like, it can be really terrifying. But like, there's going back to that journey design, there can be bot of bots that exist. At the moment, the disappointing thing is they are generally locked behind platforms, which is where I think things like Teams are a really big opportunity for it, because let's face it, the way Microsoft's been going with Teams, I wouldn't be massively surprised in the next year or so if we see like a Chromebook competitor where there's no Windows on this laptop. There is just Teams. Like, there's all these like things. There's no Windows. There's no nothing else. You've just got Teams. It's a really cheap and affordable thing. Great. So that means that can be its bot of bots naturally, because it is essentially the operating system itself. Whereas other things like, I don't want to be opening platform A to talk about platform B because, that happens to be the place we have this agent approaches type thing. And for me, that just doesn't really work. If you're in a finance platform, you're not going to open the IT support platform to ask about how to do stuff in the finance support platform. It doesn't make any sense.
Do you see in-house teams getting bigger and bigger and maybe taking some of the work that is now done by external vendors? Or do you see us a way of that we're all going to figure out how to incorporate the best of both worlds into kind of what the future looks like? What do you think? Open your crystal ball, Josh, and tell us what the future looks like.
I'll let the old, like, for the British audience, it's like the Mystic Night, which was a fortune tellers here on daytime TV in the UK. I think a bit of both. There are certainly really outstanding organizations out there that do develop everything in-house. But that is a philosophy baked into absolutely everything they do. And I've not yet seen one that isn't themselves actually a technology developer to sell externally. So it becomes part of actually their product-based mindset as well there. Whereas if you look at like the purpose of what the organization is trying to do, is developing HR technology, finance technology going to enable that? Or is it an offshoot that it's worth doing just because it's not as much technical debt as the other stuff we have that's worth going on? And that for me is what it comes down to, that there will be certain things that are worth having off the shelf. And they might be because they lean into the B2C experience and things like that. Like, I'm sure she said, oh yeah, we build everything in-house. You're telling me they don't use like LinkedIn Recruiter?
Probably not.
Like, no, they build their own social network in-house for career development and bad taste memes and things like that, and expressing your political opinion when you maybe shouldn't. But I highly doubt that. They probably interlink out to customer and consumer products at some level, but because that isn't going along with the we build everything in-house. So they have chosen, and they are doing the best of both. They're probably just doing like a 90-10, whereas other companies are probably going to be like a 30-60 or something like that, or something else. And some of it might be amalgamation tech and things like that. And some of it might just be people like me signing things together and hoping that it doesn't turn and choke me out one day, essentially.
Interesting. Okay.
So in a previous conversation, Josh, you mentioned a story about leadership development that went sideways. And we want to make sure that we get that into today's conversation. Can you tell us, what do you think people designing leadership development programs tend to miss when they don't think through everything that happens after the event?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, for a bit of context, during my kind of squiggly career, I spent a good chunk of time in L&D, both supplier side of the market, so actually vendor side, which you might be like, oh my God, but you've been saying vendors are awful so at some points in this call. But no, I was generally a vendor myself once upon a time. And one of the things that really surprised me as I worked in-house is, what are the business cases behind something? Like, how do we make it make sense to someone in the business? If someone says, hey, there's going to be cuts, why do we always seem to find that L&D is one of the first sacrificial lambs rolled up to the block there? And I was sitting like, because it doesn't really have much to defend itself. And that's where I started really analyzing it. It's like, I started to look at most big organizations where I've worked. I looked at their creme de la creme, like leadership development. We whip a load of top talent and high potentials off to some exotic location. We put people on stage to tell them they're going to be the future of the organization, give them books and really amp them up and do an absolutely phenomenal experience. And according to the happy sheet, the sandwiches are fantastic at the same time as well. So we've clearly done something really, really well there. And this is a genuine exit survey that I read as part of my career that really just summarized it all, which was, and I'll say a slightly cleaner version than what was on it. But essentially it was, you took us off to this kind of exotic space and you told us we were going to be the future of the company. I came back and told my boss, like, hey, I've got all these great ideas. And he told me to shut up and give him an Excel report. because we haven't actually thought about it from an org development perspective. It's almost cruel if we think about it that way, where we've taken these people out of their day-to-day, we've interrupted their lives, not just their professional lives, their personal lives as well. And we've really said, hey, you're going to be the latest and greatest thing. I've not yet seen many leadership development journeys where there's actually a possibility of an opening that's more senior that opens that hole for them and things like that. I've seen a lot of organizations doing like a Shark Tank, a Dragon's Den, that, yeah, they maybe open up like a temporary project budget and things like that. But at the end of the day, someone's got to put this person's bum and seat in their budget line. And if they're off doing other things for the company and not perceived value in my Excel sheet or my bubble, they can get pretty miffed about that pretty quickly. And that's a piece for me that you almost have you're a custodian of the responsibility that if you are helping develop tomorrow's talent, you need to ensure they have a smooth landing as well. Like, you need to ensure they are coming through that journey. If you look at the budget sheets and, yeah, this person's a great potential, but there's no budget to have a more senior role in the team or have a step up opportunity for them anywhere in the business, I'm sorry, then they shouldn't be on a high potential program. Use some of your L&D budget rather than paying for a plane ticket. Open up a position in the organization that allows them to step up. Give some of your budget to the business and then do your events and things like that. That's something I've not seen or heard of many organizations taking that sort of approach.
Well, and part of the challenge with that can be simply, one, the silos that exist and the goals that exist associated with those silos. And then two, I think the engagement of those business leaders, right? You know, your example, give me the Excel spreadsheet on this thing or the report on this thing. That's because there's no interconnectivity and they don't perceive that leadership program as being essential to delivering the work. And so how do you think we address particularly that silo and goals issue?
So that's a really interesting one. For me, there's many, many different ways to do it. One of the most effectively is like an OKR or an OGSM model or something like that. There's various ways to cut it, but essentially just staircase your goals all the way down and have interconnected pieces. So one of the things that I've done quite recently actually is my experienced technology team and the services team, interconnected goals. We win together, we fail together. It's very simple. There's certain goals in my team's piece that they've looked at and gone, well, I don't really have any influence on it. No, but you do have influence on getting things out of their way, which then enables them to do better at it. That can be a hugely important thing that people can understand. Yeah, at board level, we're saying we want to be the best at da-da-da, and I'm doing this thing that adds into that. And it allows the exec to look down and actually kind of go, oh, well, where are our opportunities here? This person is saying they're going to do an ad campaign that's going to add 5% to our customer base, but so's this person over here. So actually, from an OD perspective, should these teams be at least talking to each other and attached together and thinking about things together and collaborate together because they're thinking about the same ways to break down our overarching goals? And it starts allowing you to look at the organization by outputs rather than inputs as well, which is, I think, a mecca for all of us in the HR space to be like, we will one day get there, but in the meantime, can you fill in your timesheet?
Do you think we will one day get there? Because Station and I have been talking about sort of the convergence of the people functions for a while. What you're talking about is much bigger, and we're seeing the much bigger come. People functions now need to rely heavily on operations because jobs are going to change and roles are going to change and the way that we do work is going to change. And so it is all becoming one gigantic conversation and the silos no longer hold. Do you think we're going to get there? And who's in charge of making sure that we get there?
It's a great question, and it's one I don't know. And I think it will be different in every single organization, in every single kind of vision of how they interpret that and things like that. Certain things need to die, like as part of it. And these are things that are going to make people very uncomfortable. Knowing that someone's resources exist on your budget line or your spreadsheet needs to die. Like that head count, oh yeah, it's within my cost center philosophy, it's very anti that new world that's being talked about. But it must happen because that's how organizations are regulatory, needing to report in certain countries and things like that. So it really doesn't, it's one of these things where there's so many blockers that it needs to come undone in order for this to work. And it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if you're a conspiracy theorist person, that would be a really great thing for the New World Order to put on their agenda. But I'm sure they've got bigger fish to fry in the meantime.
2 final questions as we go into the end.
Yeah. So the first one that we would love to wrap up with is, What advice do you have for other leaders in situations similar to yours? What have you found just top 3 things that have worked?
Build a trusted network. That network needs to be diverse. Like, diversity of thought is a huge, huge piece. Have people that are going to challenge you. Have people that are going to make you feel uncomfortable. Like, these are the sort of things where you do need your own mental blocks gently pushed within reason. Build that space where you can have that trusted network to do those sort of things for you. Look at other industries. I mentioned it earlier in terms of my inspirations, but look at your other industries, but also empower people to make their own decisions as well. Like, you cannot be all things to all people. And if you try and do that, you're just going to burn yourself out at the end of the day. So you've got to be aware of, hey, if we do something a certain way, someone needs to maintain it a certain way. Great. You can't clone yourself. Yeah. That might be a job of HR one day to clone our hypos instead, but not yet. But in the meantime, you've got to look after those people, because if you're setting the direction and they don't agree with it, and then they're suddenly lumped with you're now the one to maintain it, they're going to be pretty rightly miffed. They're going to be the guy dragging a car uphill with square wheels going, well, I had a circular wheel idea. Like, they're going to be constantly looking for opportunities to look at changing it. And that's not good to the cohesion of the team of continuously reinventing the wheel. So, like, they're the pieces for me of, like, general advice, like, talk to people that you trust, look elsewhere, and build a team that you trust and can rely on.
Thanks, Josh. One final question. We ask this question of everyone that comes on our podcast, and we call it the purpose question. Why do you do the work that you do?
It's a very deep one. Like, a lot of people have reactions to that sort of one. For me, it's a few things myself. So one, my son is on the spectrum, and I want organizations to be a place that he could thrive and really get ahead in. And that means removing layers of things that just don't make sense. And it can take a real outsider in an industry to look at something and go, yeah, that may be the way it's always done, but explain that to a toddler. And if they look at you with a very confused face, you're probably not doing it particularly well. That's a piece for me to say, look, organizations should be simple. You can't say why you're doing something from look, it's making us money, or it's saving us money, or defending money. You probably shouldn't be doing it. And that's a big bit that gets me out of bed in the morning. So that's probably a purpose piece there to say, like, look, I did a podcast a while back and they titled it at the end, be fiscally responsible for the sake of your people. Like, for me, you're a custodian of these people. If you can't make their job make financial sense to someone that's probably never going to talk to you, but look at it on a spreadsheet, you got to think about it. You got to do it, because if not, someone's going to write your people off of that spreadsheet one day, and they're going to find out very nastily.
Good answer. Thanks, Josh, for being with us.
Thanks, Josh.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Workplace Stories. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcasts so that you can be the first to know about future episodes. For exclusive access to our research, insights, and a vibrant network of human capital leaders, consider joining the Red Thread Research community. Visit redthreadresearch.com to learn more and to take your workplace to the next level.